Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, staring at the message on his screen. He read it 3 times before the words made sense. All human forces had to leave alien space within 60 days. Every single human ship, every diplomat, every trader, every family living on alien worlds, all of them had to pack up and go home. "Sir, are you seeing this correctly?" asked his second officer, Lieutenant Ben Cooper. The young man looked confused and angry. "They want us to abandon everything we built out here?" Jake nodded slowly. The message came directly from Earth Command, but it was based on orders from something much bigger. The Galactic Council had voted. Every alien species in the galaxy had agreed on one thing: humans had to go. The decision came after months of heated debate in the great halls of the Galactic Council. The building sat on a neutral world, floating in space between the major powers. Inside those halls, representatives from dozens of species had argued about what they called the human problem. The Veltar were the worst. These tall, blue-skinned aliens considered themselves the nobles of the galaxy. They had ruled star systems for thousands of years before humans even learned to make fire. Ambassador Kethvar, their chief representative, spoke for many when he said humans were too unpredictable, too quick to change things, too willing to break old rules. "These humans," Kethvar had said during one heated session, "they come to our worlds and immediately start suggesting improvements. They question our methods. They propose new solutions to problems we solved centuries ago. They are a disruption to the natural order of things." The Cronin hegemony agreed, though for different reasons. These warrior-like beings with their thick, gray skin and 4 arms had built their empire on military strength and honor codes that never changed. General Borthak spoke for his people when he complained that humans fought wars all wrong. "They do not follow proper battle doctrine," he had growled to the assembly. "They improvise. They break formations. They use tactics we have never seen before. How can we plan proper campaigns when our allies refuse to follow established military wisdom?" Even the Zephyrian Trade Union, usually neutral in political matters, supported the human removal. These 6-legged insect-like beings controlled most of the galaxy's commerce. Their representative, Commerce Director Scythen, worried that human trading methods disrupted carefully planned market systems. "Humans negotiate differently," Scythen had clicked in the strange language his species used. "They form partnerships instead of following proper hierarchies. They share technology freely instead of selling it properly. They make trade agreements based on friendship rather than profit margins. This chaos threatens the stability of our economic networks." The vote was unanimous. 47 species voted to impose the Species Limitation Accord on humanity. The document was written in formal language, but the message was simple. Humans had 60 days to leave all non-human space and return to their own solar system. Commander Lisa Park received the news while sitting in her office on the diplomatic station orbiting the Galactic Council chambers. As head of the Human Diplomatic Corps, she had spent 5 years trying to build bridges between humanity and the alien species. She had learned 17 different alien languages. She had attended countless ceremonies and cultural events. She had believed that patience and understanding would eventually win over even the most stubborn alien officials. The Galactic Council's decision felt like a personal failure. Lisa walked slowly to the main chamber where she would deliver humanity's final message to the assembled alien representatives. The Great Hall was packed. Representatives from every member species had come to hear what the humans would say. She stood at the podium and looked out at the sea of alien faces. Some looked relieved. Others appeared curious. A few seemed almost sorry about what they had done. "Honored representatives of the Galactic Council," Lisa began, her voice steady despite the anger burning in her chest. "We have received your decision regarding the Species Limitation Accord. Humanity acknowledges the will of this assembly." She paused, letting the words sink in. Effective immediately. Humanity withdraws all presence from non-Terran space. We will remove our ships, our people, our technology, and our influence from your worlds and systems. We wish you well in your future endeavors." Lisa turned and walked away without waiting for questions or responses. Behind her, she could hear excited chatter in dozens of alien languages. Many of them sounded pleased. Ambassador Kethvar rose from his seat and addressed the assembly. "Finally," he said with obvious satisfaction, "we can return to proper civilization without these chaotic primates interfering in our affairs. The galaxy will be more stable without their constant disruptions." The evacuation began immediately. Human ships appeared at the edges of every alien system, ready to collect their people and belongings. Captain Morrison received orders to oversee the evacuation of Sector 7, which included 3 major trade stations and a dozen smaller outposts. The aliens watched the humans pack with mixed feelings. Some were glad to see them go. Others seemed uncertain now that the reality of human departure was actually happening. On the trade station Prosperity Point, human engineer Danny Walsh supervised the removal of equipment his team had installed over the past 3 years. The station's alien administrator, a nervous Zephyrian named Click-Tar, kept asking questions. "But who will maintain the new water recycling system?" Click-Tar asked, his antennae twitching with worry. "Your people designed it. We do not fully understand how it works." Danny shrugged as he packed his tools. "You voted us out. Figure it out yourselves." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human doctors left alien hospitals, taking with them new medical techniques they had developed. Human engineers abandoned construction projects halfway through completion. Human teachers gathered their materials from alien schools, leaving behind confused students who had been learning human languages and methods. Dr. Sam Rodriguez, head of the human research station orbiting the gas giant Nerlon, felt particularly bitter as he watched his life's work being loaded onto transport ships. He had spent 8 years studying the unique electromagnetic patterns in Nerlon's atmosphere, work that could have led to breakthroughs in energy production for the entire galaxy. 23 years I've been out here," he told his assistant, as they sealed the last of the research data. 23 years building relationships, sharing knowledge, working toward a common future. And they throw it all away because we make them uncomfortable. The human evacuation was remarkably efficient. Within 55 days, every human civilian, soldier, diplomat, and trader had left alien space. They took with them not just their people, but their technology, their methods, and their way of thinking. The aliens celebrated the successful removal of what they saw as a disruptive element. On the Veltar homeworld, Kethvar hosted a grand party for other ambassadors. "To order, restored," he announced, raising a crystal glass filled with blue liquid, "to the return of proper civilization." But even as the celebrations continued, small problems began appearing. On the trade station Prosperity Point, the water recycling system that Danny Walsh had built started making strange noises. Click-Tar tried to contact human engineers for advice, but received only automated messages stating that all technical support for non-human installations had been terminated. On the Cronin military base at Sword's Edge, structural engineers noticed hairline, cracks appearing in the hull of their newest battleship. The cracks followed patterns they had never seen before, but human consultants who might have explained them were no longer available. Captain Morrison watched the last human transport ship leave his sector and head toward the Sol system. Behind them, they left empty stations, abandoned projects, and confused aliens who were just beginning to realize what they had lost. The galaxy had gotten exactly what it asked for. The humans were gone. Now they would learn what life was like without them. 3 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared from alien space. On the Cronin military base at Sword's Edge, Chief Engineer Borth Ock stood in the wreckage of what used to be the pride of their fleet. The battleship Iron Fang lay, broken in 2 pieces, its massive hull split down the middle like a cracked egg. How many ships have we lost now? Asked General Vexmar, his 4 arms crossed in frustration. 17 battleships, sir, Borthak replied, his voice heavy with defeat, all showing the same structural failures. The metal becomes brittle and cracks along stress points we never knew existed. Borthak had spent the last month digging through old construction records, trying to understand what had gone wrong. The answer he found made his stomach turn. For the past 5 years, human engineers had been quietly consulting on Cronin ship designs. They had suggested small changes to metal composition, stress distribution, and hull geometry. Changes that seemed minor at the time, but apparently prevented exactly this kind of catastrophic failure. The humans knew our ships would break, Borthak said quietly. They were fixing problems we did not even know we had. The same conversation was happening on dozens of worlds across the galaxy. On Zephyr Prime, the agricultural center of the Zephyrian Trade Union, agricultural director. Scythen stared at reports that made no sense. Crop yields had dropped by 40% across the entire planet. Plants that had grown well for generations were now struggling to survive. What changed? Scythen demanded, his 6 legs clicking nervously on the metal floor of the observation tower. We use the same seeds, the same soil, the same weather control systems. His assistant, a younger Zephyrian named Buzzak, had been investigating the problem for weeks. Sir, I found something in the old agricultural reports. 3 years ago, human advisors suggested changes to our crop rotation schedule. They also recommended new soil treatment methods and different spacing between plants. Scythen felt his antennae droop. And we implemented these suggestions? Yes, sir. The changes improved yields by 60% over 2 growing seasons. We thought our own methods had simply gotten better with experience. We did not realize the humans were responsible for the improvements. The pattern repeated itself across known space. On the luxury space stations orbiting the Veltar homeworld, life support systems began failing at an alarming rate. Atmospheric processors that had worked perfectly for years suddenly could not maintain proper oxygen levels. Water recycling systems produced liquid that tasted wrong and sometimes made people sick. Ambassador Kethvar, the same Veltar who had celebrated humanity's departure, found himself dealing with an emergency he did not understand. His personal space yacht, a symbol of Veltar engineering excellence, had lost life support completely while traveling between stations. He and his staff barely made it to an emergency port before suffocating. What is happening to our technology? He demanded during an emergency meeting of Veltar engineers. These systems worked perfectly before. Senior engineer Veltara had spent weeks analyzing the failures. Her blue skin had turned pale with worry as she uncovered the truth. Ambassador, our records show that human technicians performed routine maintenance on many of our systems during joint operations over the past several years. They claim to be learning our methods, but analysis suggests they were actually making improvements. What kind of improvements? Kethvar asked, though he already feared the answer. Small optimizations to air filtration algorithms, adjustments to water recycling processes, modifications to power distribution networks, changes so subtle that our own technicians did not notice them. But without these modifications, our systems revert to their original specifications, which are apparently inadequate for current operational demands. The news got worse every day. On Earth's border monitoring stations, Dr. Sam Rodriguez tracked alien communications with growing amazement. Distress signals were increasing exponentially across the galaxy. Medical emergencies, technical failures, and system breakdowns were happening everywhere humans had once worked. Are you seeing this? He asked his colleague, Dr. Angela Foster, as they reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The Drakmori Collective just took 3 more systems. The Veltar lost an entire merchant fleet to navigation errors. The Zephyrians are facing food shortages on 12 worlds. Angela nodded grimly as she studied the data. It gets worse. Look at the scientific research reports. Progress on quantum drive development has stopped completely. Medical research programs are failing. Even basic engineering projects are running into problems nobody can solve. The truth was becoming clear to those who bothered to look. Humans had not just participated in galactic civilization, they had quietly become essential to its functioning. Their willingness to question established methods, to try new approaches, and to share knowledge freely had been driving progress throughout known space. Dr. Rodriguez found the most disturbing example in a medical report from the Altani Healing Centers. The Altani were master doctors whose regenerative treatments were famous throughout the galaxy. But their recent patient mortality rates had doubled. "Look at this," Rodriguez said, pointing to the data. 2 years ago, human medical student Janet Mills spent 6 months studying Altani techniques. She suggested combining their regenerative treatments with human surgical methods. The mortality rate dropped to almost 0. "And now?" Angela asked. "Now, they are back to using pure Altani methods and people are dying again. But get this. They do not even remember that the human suggestions were what made their treatment so much better. They think their recent failures are just bad luck. The pattern was everywhere once you knew how to look for it. Human traders had not just moved goods between worlds, they had optimized shipping routes, developed new risk assessment methods, and created conflict resolution protocols that kept commerce flowing smoothly. Without them, trade routes were failing as alien merchants could not adapt to changing conditions. Human teachers had not just learned alien languages and customs, they had developed new educational methods that helped alien students learn faster and remember more. Schools across the galaxy were struggling as traditional teaching methods proved less effective than anyone remembered. Human soldiers had not just fought alongside alien forces. They had introduced tactical innovations, adaptive strategies, and flexible command structures that made alien armies far more effective. Military commanders who had once dismissed human methods as chaotic were now losing battles they should have won easily. On the trade station, Prosperity Point, Clicktar faced a crisis that was destroying his career. The water recycling system that human engineer Danny Walsh had built was completely broken. Strange chemicals were contaminating the water supply, and Clicktar had no idea how to fix it. "Did the humans leave any technical manuals?" he asked, his staff desperately. "No, sir," replied his assistant. "When they departed, they took all documentation related to systems they had modified. They said it was proprietary human technology, and we had voted to reject human involvement in galactic affairs." Clicktar wanted to send a message to Danny Walsh, begging for help. But the humans had made it clear. All technical support for non-human installations was permanently terminated. The station that had been Prosperity Point's crown jewel was now its biggest liability. The aliens had thought humans were disruptive. They had complained that human methods were unpredictable and chaotic. They had wanted to return to the stable, orderly civilization that existed before humans arrived. What they discovered was that their old civilization had not been stable at all. It had been stagnant. Human innovation, human problem-solving, and human adaptability had been quietly holding everything together, making improvements so gradual and subtle that nobody noticed them happening. Admiral Grace Thompson, now commanding. Humanity's border defense forces received daily reports about the growing chaos in alien space. She felt no satisfaction in being proven right, only sadness at the waste of it all. "They wanted us gone," she told her staff during a morning briefing. "They have no right to expect our help now. But I cannot help feeling sorry for them. They have no idea how much worse things are going to get." She was right. The failures they were seeing now were just the beginning. The real disasters were still coming. 1 year after the Great Withdrawal, galactic civilization stood on the edge of complete collapse. The Drakmori Collective had conquered 47 star systems and showed no signs of slowing down. Refugee ships filled with millions of displaced Aliens drifted through space, running out of food and fuel with nowhere safe to land. Ambassador Kethvar sat in the command chair of his damaged diplomatic vessel, the Eternal Grace, as it limped toward the border of human space. The same Veltar who had celebrated humanity's departure now looked like he had aged decades in a single year. His blue skin was pale and marked with stress lines. His once proud uniform was torn and stained with smoke from the fires that had consumed his homeworld's capital city. "Sir," said his aide nervously, "we are approaching the human border. Their patrol ships are demanding we state our business." Kethvar closed his eyes and tried to find the words he never thought he would have to speak. "Open a channel to the human vessels. Tell them that Ambassador Kethvar of the Veltar Empire requests permission to deliver a message to humanity." The response came quickly from the lead human ship. "Ambassador, this is Admiral Grace Thompson of the Terran Border Defense Force. You are in violation of the Species Limitation Accord by entering human space. State your emergency and prepare to be escorted back to the neutral zone." "Admiral Thompson," Kethvar said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I come not as a representative of the Galactic Council, which no longer exists, but as a being who has witnessed the consequences of our grave error." On the bridge of the human flagship Invincible, Admiral Thompson watched the alien ship on her main screen. The vessel was clearly damaged, with scorch marks along its hull and several sections that appeared to be held together with emergency patches. She had been expecting something like this for months. "Put him through," she told her communications officer. "Let us hear what he has to say." Kethvar's image appeared on the screen, and Thompson was shocked by his appearance. The arrogant diplomat, who had once looked down on humans as chaotic primates, now looked broken and desperate. "Admiral, I must tell you what has happened since your people departed," Kethvar began. "The Drakmori forces have destroyed the Veltar Second Fleet completely. Our homeworld is under siege. The Cronin hegemony has lost over half its territory. The Zephyrian trade union has collapsed into civil war. Billions of beings are dead or displaced." Thompson kept her expression neutral, though inside she felt a mixture of sadness and anger. "You made your choice, Ambassador. The galaxy voted unanimously to remove human presence. We honored that decision." "We were wrong," Kethvar said, the words seeming to cause him physical pain. "We thought you were the source of chaos in our ordered galaxy. We believed that removing humans would restore stability and allow us to return to our traditional ways of life." He paused, gathering strength to continue. "What we discovered is that you were not the chaos. You were the adaptability that kept our systems alive. You were the innovation that solved problems we did not even know we had. You were the stability that held our civilization together." The message continued for nearly an hour, as Kethvar described the full scope of the disaster. Trade routes completely collapsed, scientific research programs abandoned, military forces using tactics so predictable that enemies could anticipate every move, social structures breaking down as species reverted to ancient prejudices without human mediation to resolve conflicts. Captain Jake Morrison watched the transmission from his patrol ship at the edge of the neutral zone. His crew stood silently behind him, listening to the alien diplomat describe the fall of galactic civilization. When the message ended, the bridge remained quiet for a long moment. "Sir," said Lieutenant Ben Cooper finally, "there are children on those refugee ships, millions of them. They are going to die if someone does not help them." Morrison nodded slowly. He had been receiving similar reports for weeks. Civilian transports filled with alien families, drifting through space with failing life support systems. Medical ships overwhelmed with wounded beings and diseases that human doctors once knew how to treat. Research stations abandoned as their alien crews fled advancing Drakmori forces. The moral weight of the situation was crushing. Every human ship in the Border Patrol faced the same dilemma: maintain the withdrawal that the galaxy had demanded, or return to help despite the insults and rejection they had endured. On Earth, Prime Minister Helen Carter convened an emergency session of the Human Council. The Great Assembly Hall was packed with representatives from every human world and station. The debate that followed was the most intense in human political history. Senator Rick Murphy from the Mars colonies spoke first, his voice filled with anger. They called us chaotic primitives. They said we were disrupting their superior civilization. They voted unanimously to kick us out like we were some kind of disease. Now they want our help? Let them solve their own problems. Senator Maria Santos from the Europa Research Station stood to respond. Senator Murphy, I understand your anger. We all feel it. But we are talking about billions of innocent lives, children who had no say in their government's decisions, scientists and doctors and teachers who probably disagreed with the vote but had no power to stop it. The arguments continued for hours. Representatives from the outer colonies, who had lost friends and family when human outposts were abandoned, demanded that the aliens face the consequences of their choices. Representatives from the core worlds, many of whom had alien colleagues and friends before the withdrawal, argued that humanity had a moral obligation to help. Dr. Angela Foster presented her analysis of the situation to the council. The data is clear, she said. Galactic civilization is experiencing complete systemic collapse. Without intervention, we are looking at the deaths of potentially trillions of beings over the next few years. The Drakmori Collective will not stop with the current conquered territories. They will continue expanding until they control the entire galaxy or until they destroy themselves fighting over the ruins. Prime Minister Carter listened to every argument before speaking. The question before us is not whether the aliens deserve our help. The question is whether we can live with ourselves if we do nothing while civilizations die around us. She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. But if we choose to act, it cannot be as silent partners who fix problems in the background while others take credit. It cannot be as junior allies who are tolerated but not respected. If humanity returns to galactic affairs, it must be as equals with a voice in how things are run. Meanwhile, at the border, more alien ships arrived every day. Captain Morrison received a priority message from a Veltar civilian transport carrying 15,000 refugees, mostly families with young children. The ship's life support was failing, and they had less than 2 days of breathable air remaining. Captain Morrison, came the desperate voice of the transport's commander. I know we have no right to ask for your help. I know my people voted to send yours away. But I have children on this ship who will die if you do not act. I am begging you, not as a representative of the Veltar Empire, but as one parent speaking to another. Morrison closed his eyes and made a decision that would change everything. All ships, this is Captain Morrison. We have civilians in immediate danger. Prepare to render assistance. His second officer looked concerned. Sir, we will be violating our withdrawal orders. Then we violate them, Morrison replied. I will not watch children die because their leaders made stupid political decisions. As human ships moved to rescue the alien refugees, word spread quickly through both human and alien communication networks. Humanity was acting again, despite everything that had happened. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would come next. 6 months after the humans left, the galaxy faced its first major war in over 2 centuries. The Drakmori Collective, a group of aggressive reptilian species from the Outer Rim, launched coordinated attacks on 3 different sectors at the same time. What should have been minor border disputes exploded into full-scale warfare that spread across dozens of star systems. General Vextar of the Galactic Defense Corps stood in the command center of the Fortress World Bastion Prime, watching. Red warning lights flash across the tactical display. Every report brought worse news. The Veltar Third Fleet had been destroyed at the Battle of Kepler Station. Cronin forces were retreating from the Omega Sector after losing half their ships. Zephyrian merchant vessels were being captured or destroyed faster than they could be replaced. "How are they doing this?" Vextar demanded, his blue skin dark with rage. "The Drakmori were never this effective before. Our intelligence said they had inferior technology and poor coordination." His aide, a young Veltar officer, named Kelvak, pulled up battle analysis reports on the main screen. "Sir, they seem to know exactly how we will respond to every attack. They position their forces perfectly to counter our standard tactics. It is as if they have studied our military doctrine for years and know how to exploit every weakness." Vextar felt a cold chill run down his spine. "Show me our tactical protocols from before the human departure." The comparison was shocking. For the past decade, Galactic Defense Corps strategy had been heavily influenced by human military advisors. Captain Morrison and others had introduced concepts like adaptive tactics, flexible command structures, and unpredictable response patterns. They had taught alien commanders to vary their approaches, to think creatively about problems, and to change strategies in the middle of battle when circumstances demanded it. But after the humans left, military leaders had returned to traditional methods. They used the same battle formations their ancestors had used for centuries. They followed predictable patterns based on ancient honor codes and established doctrine. The Drakmori, who had been watching and learning for decades, could anticipate every move. "Sir," Kelvak said quietly, "I found something else. Communication intercepts suggest the Drakmori have been planning this invasion for 15 years. They waited until the humans left because human tactical advice made our forces too unpredictable to attack successfully." The realization hit Vextar like a physical blow. The humans had not just been allies. They had been the invisible shield protecting galactic civilization from its enemies. Their unconventional thinking and adaptive strategies had made the galaxy's defenses strong enough to deter aggression. The economic situation was even worse. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades were collapsing as alien merchants could not adapt to the disruptions caused by the war. Navigation Officer Kyle Brooks, monitoring the chaos from the human border station New Horizon, shook his head as he watched the disaster unfold. "Look at this mess," he told his commanding officer, Captain Ellen Rivera. "The main shipping lane through the Centauri cluster is completely blocked because of a minor asteroid collision. Before the humans left, that would have been rerouted in hours. Now the Zephyrians have been trying to solve it for 3 weeks. Captain." Rivera studied the reports with growing amazement. "What about the Veltar luxury trade routes?" "Complete disaster," Kyle replied. "They lost 12 cargo ships last month because they could not calculate safe hyperspace jumps around the war zones. Human navigation software used to handle those calculations automatically, but apparently nobody understood how it worked. The collapse was accelerating as each failure created new problems. The Zephyrian Trade Union, once the backbone of Galactic commerce, was fragmenting into competing factions as different groups blamed each other for the economic crisis. Without human crisis management techniques and diplomatic mediation, old rivalries were resurging with destructive force. Dr. Angela Foster, working at the Xenosociology Research Center on Luna, had been studying alien communications for months. Her findings painted a terrifying picture of galactic civilization falling apart. "The social structures are breaking down," she reported to the Human Council during their weekly briefing. "Species that have cooperated for centuries are turning against each other. The Veltar are blaming the Cronins for military failures. The Cronins are accusing the Zephyrians of economic sabotage. The Zephyrians claim everyone else is trying to destroy their trade networks." Prime Minister Helen Carter, attending the meeting via hologram from Earth, asked the question everyone was thinking. "How bad is it really, Dr. Foster?" "Catastrophic," Angela replied without hesitation. "Galactic civilization is reverting to historical prejudices and territorial disputes that were resolved centuries ago. It appears that human presence was serving as a stabilizing factor that none of them recognized. We were the neutral party that helped them work through conflicts. Without us, They have no mechanism for resolving disputes peacefully. The most tragic consequences were visible in the research facilities scattered throughout alien space. Scientific progress had ground to a complete halt as researchers discovered that human methodology, their willingness to challenge established theories, their innovative experimental approaches, and their collaborative spirit had been driving most major breakthroughs for decades. On the research station Deep Thought, orbiting the neutron star Pulsar 7, Veltar scientist Mordan stared at equations that made no sense. His team had been working on quantum drive improvements for 6 months, without making any progress. The same research that had advanced rapidly when human scientists were involved now seemed impossible to continue. "What did the humans do differently?" asked his assistant, a young researcher named Velsara. Morden pulled up old research logs from when human scientist Dr. Patricia Chen had worked with their team. "Look at this. When we reached a dead end in our calculations, Dr. Chen suggested we question our basic assumptions about quantum field interactions. She recommended experiments that violated established protocols. And those experiments worked. They led to our biggest breakthrough in quantum mechanics in 50 years, Mordan admitted reluctantly. But our education taught us that established protocols exist for good reasons. Questioning fundamental assumptions is considered unprofessional and dangerous. So we cannot continue the research without human methodology?" Mordan sighed deeply. "We can continue using traditional methods, but our progress will be measured in centuries rather than years. The humans compressed what should have been decades of research into months by refusing to accept that something was impossible just because we had never done it before." Similar scenes played out in laboratories across the galaxy. Medical research. Programs designed to cure genetic diseases had stalled because human researchers were no longer available to suggest unconventional treatment approaches. Engineering projects failed because human problem-solving techniques were no longer being applied to complex technical challenges. Captain Morrison, now patrolling the border between human and alien space aboard the UCS Defiant, received daily intelligence reports about the growing catastrophe. Each report was worse than the last. Refugee populations were fleeing war zones by the millions, but the logistics networks needed to help them had collapsed. Medical facilities were overwhelmed, not just by war casualties, but by preventable diseases that human-improved treatments had previously controlled. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, Lieutenant Amy Watson, "we are receiving over 1,000 distress calls per day from alien civilian vessels. Most are requesting navigation assistance, medical advice, or technical support." Morrison felt the weight of command pressing down on his shoulders. "And our orders?" "Maintain the withdrawal protocols, sir. No contact with non-human vessels except to warn them away from human space." Morrison looked out at the stars, knowing that beyond his view, an entire galactic civilization was crumbling. The aliens had demanded that humans leave, and humans had honored that demand completely. But the cost was becoming clear with each passing day. The galaxy had not just lost human presence, it had lost the innovative thinking, adaptive problem-solving, and collaborative spirit that had held everything together. The Drakmori invasion was just the beginning. Worse disasters were coming, and the aliens were discovering they had no idea how to stop them. 18 months after the Great Withdrawal, humanity stood at a crossroads that would determine the fate of the galaxy. The Human Council had debated for weeks, but the decision ultimately came down to a simple vote. Return to help the aliens who had rejected them, or watch galactic civilization destroy itself. Prime Minister Helen Carter stood before the packed assembly hall on Earth, holding the results of the vote in her hands. Representatives from every human world and station waited in tense silence for her announcement. "The Human Council has reached its decision," Carter said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "By a margin of 68% to 32%, humanity chooses to return to galactic affairs. But we return on our terms, with conditions that must be met before any assistance is provided." The conditions were harsh, but fair. Complete restructuring of interspecies relations. Formal recognition of human contributions to galactic civilization. Ironclad guarantees against future discrimination. Most importantly, humanity would no longer serve as silent partners whose innovations were taken for granted. Their methods, perspectives, and contributions must be acknowledged and respected. We will not return as saviors or conquerors, Carter continued. We return as partners who have learned that walking away sometimes teaches harder lessons than staying and fighting. We hope the galaxy has learned them too. Captain Jake Morrison received the news while docked at the border station New Horizon. He had been expecting the decision, but seeing it made official still felt overwhelming. His ship, the UCS Defiant, would lead the first human relief mission into alien space in over a year. All hands, this is the captain, Morrison announced, over the ship's communication system. We have received orders to proceed to the Veltar system and begin humanitarian operations. This is not a military mission, but we may encounter hostile forces. Be ready for anything. The fleet that assembled at the border was impressive but modest. 12 ships carrying medical supplies, engineering equipment, and food for the millions of refugees scattered throughout alien space. Admiral Grace Thompson's flagship Invincible would provide military escort, but the primary mission was rescue and relief. As the human fleet crossed into alien space for the first time in 18 months, they found a galaxy transformed by disaster. The first stop was the Veltar homeworld, once a shining example of advanced civilization, now a burned and broken planet under siege by Drakmori forces. Ambassador Kethvar waited at the emergency spaceport, his damaged ship the only diplomatic. Vessel the Veltar had left. When Captain Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle, Kethvar approached with tears streaming down his blue face. "Captain Morrison," he said, his voice breaking with emotion, "I do not know how to thank you for coming. We understand now what we lost when we sent your people away." Morrison looked around at the destruction surrounding the spaceport. Buildings lay in ruins. Refugee camps stretched to the horizon. The proud Veltar civilization that had once looked down on humans as primitive chaos bringers was now completely dependent on human charity for survival. "Ambassador," Morrison replied carefully, "we are here to help civilians and refugees. But first, we need to discuss the new terms for human involvement in galactic affairs." The negotiations took place in a damaged government building that had once housed the Veltar ruling council. Morrison presented the Human Council's conditions, while Kethvar listened with growing understanding. "You want formal recognition that human innovation saved our civilization," Kethvar said slowly. "You want guarantees that humans will be treated as equals in all future galactic decisions. You want us to admit that we were wrong about everything." "We want honesty," Morrison corrected. "We want the galaxy to understand what really happened here. For too long, human contributions were ignored or forgotten. We fixed problems in the background while others took credit. We shared our knowledge freely while being told we were disruptive and chaotic. That ends now." While diplomatic talks continued, human engineers began the massive task of rebuilding galactic civilization. Danny Walsh, the same engineer who had been forced to abandon his work on Prosperity Point, returned to find the station in complete ruins. The water recycling system he had built was not just broken, it had contaminated the entire station's water supply, forcing the evacuation of 30,000 residents. "How long has it been like this?" Danny asked the station administrator, Clicktar, who looked embarrassed and ashamed. 8 months, Clicktar admitted. "We tried to fix it ourselves, but we made it worse. We did not understand how your modifications worked. We thought we could return to our old methods, but the old methods do not work anymore." Danny spent 3 days analyzing the damage before he understood the full scope of the problem. The aliens had not just failed to maintain human improvements, they had actively tried to remove them, not realizing that their original systems had been completely rebuilt around human innovations. "You did not just break the water recycling system," Danny explained to Clicktar. "You broke the power distribution network, the atmospheric controls, and the structural support systems. Everything was connected. When you removed the human modifications from one system, you destroyed the integrated network that kept the whole station functioning." Similar discoveries happened throughout the galaxy as human engineers assessed the damage. What the aliens thought were simple technical failures were actually the collapse of complex integrated systems that humans had spent years developing. Fixing the problems would require completely rebuilding galactic infrastructure from the ground up. Dr. Sam Rodriguez returned to his research station orbiting the gas giant Nurlon to find 8 years of work destroyed. The Veltar researchers who had taken over the project had abandoned it within months, unable to understand the human scientific methods that had made the research possible. "They threw away everything," Sam told his assistant as they surveyed the wreckage of the laboratory. 23 years of breakthrough research on electromagnetic energy patterns gone because they thought human scientific methods were too chaotic and undisciplined. But rebuilding was not just about fixing technology. The social damage was even more severe. Dr. Angela Foster, now serving as head of Human Diplomatic Affairs, discovered that alien species had reverted to prejudices and conflicts that had been dormant for centuries. "The Cronins and Veltar are practically at war with each other," she reported to Captain Morrison during a strategy meeting. "Each side blames the other for military failures against the Drakmori. The Zephyrians refuse to trade with either species, claiming they are unreliable partners. Without human mediation, they have no mechanism for resolving these disputes." The breakthrough came when the reformed Galactic Assembly held its first meeting in the ruins of the old council chambers. Representatives from surviving alien governments gathered to hear humanity's terms for continued assistance. Prime Minister Carter herself traveled to address the assembly, the first human leader to speak to an alien government since the withdrawal. "Honored delegates," Carter began, looking out at the assembled aliens who had once voted unanimously to remove human presence from their space. "Humanity returns to galactic affairs today, but we return with a new understanding. We are not your servants, your junior partners, or your silent helpers. We are your equals, with our own perspectives, methods, and contributions." She paused, letting the words sink in. For too long, the galaxy operated under the belief that there was one correct way to solve every problem. The traditional way, the established way, the way things had always been done. Humans brought different approaches, and you called us chaotic and disruptive. What you have learned over this past year is that your traditional methods were not working as well as you thought. Human innovation, human problem-solving, and human adaptability were quietly holding your civilization together. Without them, everything fell apart. Carter's speech laid out the new reality. Humanity would help rebuild galactic civilization, but the rebuilt galaxy would be different. Multiple approaches to problems would be encouraged rather than discouraged. Innovation would be valued rather than feared. Different perspectives would be seen as strengths rather than disruptions. The cost of walking away had been paid by everyone, but the lessons learned would shape the galaxy for generations to come. Ambassador Kethvar, speaking for the surviving alien governments, formally accepted humanity's terms and issued a public apology for the mistakes that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization. As reconstruction began, both humans and aliens worked together with a new understanding. The galaxy had learned that strength comes not from uniformity or rigid tradition, but from the unique contributions each species brings to solving complex problems. The year of separation had been painful for everyone, but it had taught them all the true value of cooperation, respect, and diversity. The humans had walked away, and the galaxy had quickly felt the consequences. Now they were walking back, but this time as partners rather than servants, ready to build something better than what had come before.